Please welcome IBM General Manager Data and AI, Ritika Gunnar.
Hey, how's everyone doing today? Everyone's doing great? Okay. Well, I am glad to be here today, and I have to thank the SingleStore team and Raj and everyone for being such great partners of IBM. I'm going to talk a little bit about the data side of things and how things fit into it, but we are really grateful for our longstanding partnership, and I wanted to share a little bit about where we're seeing a lot of the trends in the adoption of generative AI, especially in the enterprise, and how does that really relate to what we're seeing not only on the Gen AI and AI side, what that means really for data, and kind of like some of the other components. So I'll start with we've had around from the beginning of the year to now around 2,500 active AI engagements. And we went and did a complete review of each one of those 2,500 engagements in terms of the use cases that they were, what the patterns looked like, what the needs are today versus tomorrow. And from that, there were a set of really key trends that we found that are really shaping the Gen AI landscape that we think every enterprise really needs to consider. And so I thought today, I'm just going to give you a high-level view of what those are and how we see the needs of the market shaping and shifting based on some of those trends. And so these four trends, I'm going to kind of talk about them here in these four areas. And then what I'll do is I'll go through each one in more detail. But the four trends really align to, I firmly believe we are in a new era. Like if you think about the era of where we've been with systems of record, systems of insight, systems of engagement, we are absolutely here in an era of systems of actionable intelligence. I'll go into that more and how I see application and the application landscape completely transforming. You guys probably see this already in how you're building your own applications, how you're managing your applications, how systems are even shifting. So I'll go into that in more detail. The second is really data, right? Like we've always said, you can't have good AI without good data. But in the data space, there's not only how do you harness all of the data for use of Gen AI, but now you're unlocking a whole new class of data to add to that systems of intelligence. And what does that really mean for how you think about being data ready for enterprise Gen AI? The third is really trust. I mean, of course, in this landscape where you're dealing a lot with large language models that may be frontier models, how do you really have true transparency, trust? And I'm going to talk about some other pieces that really are important in this landscape of that trust element. And this fourth piece of open matters. And open isn't just necessarily open source. Open is about having a set of standards, about a set of open innovation that you can drive with the community just based on a lot of the changes that are happening. So these are the four particular areas that we're going to go into in the next 20 or so minutes. Given the crowd, I'd welcome questions at any point. I'm happy to kind of make this more interactive and engaging for you guys as well. So we can definitely make it a little bit more interactive if you want. So I'm going to go through a little bit on this new era of actionable intelligence and what it means to drive AI native applications. If you think about what's going to happen in the next 3 years, there are going to be over 1 billion new applications that are developed. And in those over 1 billion new applications that are developed, a good chunk of those, of over 50 to 60% of them, are going to be created using Gen AI itself. And so if you think about it right now, what you're seeing is your applications are being developed by Gen AI. At the same time, a lot of the software that many of us are developing and building is also being enabled by the agentic landscape. And so now I want you to really think about that as the over 1 billion new applications are being generated by Gen AI itself, there's also this notion that as every application becomes a Gen AI application, and as every application uses now agentic technologies that don't just call an LLM for an answer, but now that can do for you, you can have reasoning loops within them. What ends up happening is that the applications themselves become very different in how you interact with them. What we foresee, and I'll get into this in terms of how we see the definition of systems of actionable intelligence, is that if every software is now basically a way in which you can interact with agents and tools, which is what's happening in the market, then you can have a system of agents that are working together where they are each developed by different vendors in the market, and the power comes from these agents and these systems that work together. They action together, and therefore there is a new interaction paradigm happening in the application space, where now as a user, I have one way to be able to interact with all the different applications that I have entitlement and access to in a way that is very customized to me. So think about all the different systems. Like today, I am an employee of the IBM company, and I have access to all the different ERP and CRM systems that I have access to within IBM with one interaction paradigm. Actually, I interact with mine through Slack. That's my chat interface. And I can actually interact, and I can promote an employee. I can go kind of see what my sales pipeline looks like. I can go see what my reports look like for my tickets and support, all in one interaction paradigm, which is my chat. And you're starting to see this more and more. And I think this new interaction paradigm of how users engage with any n number of systems that they have access to with one interaction paradigm is really what we're going to see. And this is why I think we're moving into this era of systems of actionable intelligence, because now, as a user, I have the ability to start engaging workflows in an autonomous way that I could not do before. And I can do that not through necessarily knowing exactly how to get into the interface of all the different permutations and combinations of software components that I have access to. I can do that in natural language with a dynamic UI, and I can engage with every system I have access to. This provides a couple benefits, not only in terms of systems of actionable intelligence, but also lowers the barrier in how you can interact with and do very complex workflows. So when we think about how we do this within IBM, I no longer need thousands of HR support to go do kind of the things I need to for HR. Or I no longer need deeper analysts to do like my research and analysis. I can actually interact through it in a very simple way and have dynamic UIs that pop up. So I think this is the future of not only how applications are going to be built, this new era of systems of actionable intelligence, and it is going to be a new paradigm that I think is here to stay and really transform of not only how applications are built, but how you as users are going to interact with them. Does that make sense? Okay, so let's go to part 2 of that then. And part 2 of this is really enterprise Gen AI is a data problem. Like it is through and through and through. For enterprises to truly get value from Gen AI, they need to be able to take not only knowledge that the foundation model has or the frontier model has, but they need to be able to take knowledge in the enterprise and be able to augment that. There are a few things that are happening in the data landscape, and I'm sure you probably covered some of that this week, but there are a few things that we really believe that is happening. In most organizations, you have, and I heard even in the previous discussion, you have a number of data systems. You have your ERP and CRM systems on the back end. You probably have, like for us, like obviously we partner on the real-time streaming side with SingleStore. You have a number of different data sources. Data can be anywhere. It can be in the cloud. It can be on premises. And traditionally, you've had these architectures where you have operational stores and analytical stores. We definitely see that in the Gen AI space, that there is this kind of convergence that's happening of even like the kinds of workloads that are happening. But as we kind of evolve to that, the Gen AI nature of the kinds of workloads that you're generating need to be able to have access to all of the operational and analytical data stores that organizations already have. That's number one. But number two, what we see is Gen AI is also unlocking a new class of workloads like never before. I've probably had at least 5 C-level conversations on it this week, which is I have enterprise documents that are sitting all across my organization. I have data that's sitting in my Google Suite Drive. I have data that's sitting in my OneDrive. I have data sitting kind of just on my S3 buckets. Can you help me make sense of that? And I think to this point, we have had a really hard time unlocking documents, enterprise documents, even images, even some forms of video in the enterprise to be able to use for analytical intelligence and purposes. But we're now at a point where we can do that. But what becomes really important are the things of security. So the same policy enforcement that we already have had in our operational and analytical systems of our structured and semi-structured data, how are you going to provide that on enterprise unstructured data? How are you going to propagate the fact that this file system had access for these people, this file system had access for another set of people, and really cross-pollinate that to have a common policy enforcement management system, identity access controls, et cetera, to unstructured that propagates through the metadata. This is really kind of one of the main things we get asked of, can you help us with policy enforcement, redaction of data, PII that happens in unstructured? And now when you can take the unstructured data that's unlocked and you can augment that with the stores that you have in your operational and your analytical data, you now begin to unlock a new class of workloads. Just think about this for a moment. There is 10 times more unstructured data than there is structured in the world. And so if we can now really, truly unlock this for the enterprise, we have a new level of unlock that most organizations can really drive. And this is really what I think the biggest value is in the market is as we start to kind of drive this view of really unlocking all data in the enterprise, because now through foundation models, we can have access to public. You have your structured that's always been there, whether that be the operational or analytical. And now you have unstructured, I'm going to say for simplistic purposes, enterprise documents to start with. This is real value. Now, the security part is one of the biggest inhibitors. The second inhibitor that we see quite often that is really, really critical is this notion of reliability. And reliability to us really is a definition of a couple of different very key things that become really important with different data types. The first is accuracy. As you're doing operations on unstructured data, how accurate are the outcomes for the kind of workloads? Standard practices that we have today in the Gen AI world of just standard RAG, et cetera, never achieve the kind of accuracy that very regulated enterprises would ever drive. And so I think this notion of, can I get great accuracy? Can I do that at the right cost? Can I do that with the right consistency so that you are giving me something that is not just accurate once and not accurate the second time, but I expect very consistent answers becomes really important. I was talking to an insurance provider yesterday, the CIO of an insurance provider, and she said, for me to really kind of drive the right kind of unlock on unstructured data, I need to make sure that if I'm doing, for example, policy enforcement of a particular insurance type, that I can consistently be able to go back and say that, you know, we have claims of, for example, 2,000 is our policy floor that we have for this kind of a policy type. And so the consistency and accuracy of how these answers kind of come to bear become really, really important when it comes to the data equation. The thing that we see here is that not only are we now unlocking unstructured data, not only is there kind of this convergence we see between like operational and analytical stores. When we think about data at the edge, when we think about real-time streaming data, there is now a new way to unlock intelligence on all of these different types of data. So that's really the second piece. The third is really around this notion of trust. And I'm going to break this down in a little bit more detail in terms of what does trust really mean for organizations in the Gen AI world. The first thing it really means is, and I break this down, like when we think about the Gen AI space and what trust is, or what transparency really means and what governance really means, I break it down into three particular areas. The first one is really around lifecycle management. So if you think about the world of machine learning, even LLMs, you had ML ops for the machine learning lifecycle management. You had LLM ops when we came out with like frontier models and foundation models and kind of what it meant to drive the lifecycle of that as you build out your Gen AI applications and as you push that into production and how you kind of continuously manage that. What does that look like now in an agent? Where you want to answer that? Go ahead. That's exactly the terminology. So from ML ops to LLM ops to agent ops. I actually spent 4 hours on this morning with our leadership team at IBM. Agent ops, especially with the agent development lifecycle, just as software had software development, agents now have agent development lifecycle. And so this is going to be a primary focus of what trust really means. Do we have the same kind of lifecycle management for agents that we did for software? So this is really going to be underpinning. And in here, in agent ops, there are really three components that become important. Observability. Do I have the right tracing, the right metrics in terms of what the agent is doing, what decisions the agent is having, what calls they're making, how many loops they're actually calling? The second is really on the eval harnesses. Do I have a way to be able to make a better agent, to be able to change every variable that happens in that life cycle? The prompt, the model, the tools that are being called, and can I make a better agent for you? The third area, which is a big focus for us, is optimization. Can I help you automatically build the best agent possible? And this is really where we're putting a lot of focus, because if I can automatically tell you what model to use, what prompt to use, what style of agent to use, you're in a much, much better space. So this notion of agent ops becomes really, really important in this space. The second area is risk and compliance. And the second area of trust and why it is really critical in risk and compliance is because now, just as you have large language models, now you have agents that are making decisions in an organization. The risk and compliance posture, especially for heavily regulated areas, becomes super, super important. So this risk and compliance area is the one where we're going to put a lot of effort in to be able to help people. And the third is really security. Why is security so critical? Agents now have the identity of a person or some person to be able to actually continue actions to actually do. And so it becomes really, really critical for the agent to be able to have identity access management, to be able to do things like red teaming, to be able to integrate into the systems and take the same kind of, for tool calling, the same kind of capabilities that you have given the agent to be able to drive to the tools as well. So this is really what becomes really, really important. Do you have capabilities to do things like experimentation tracking, to monitor these agentic systems, to make them better, to secure them, to give them the kinds of traceability you need to have, and to be able to do that in a way where you have a governed catalog so the right people have access to the right agents and tools for the right kind of outcomes. So this is what we mean when we really talk about the trust component. And finally, the fourth is really about driving a set of open source, open core kind of components, open standards, and open innovation. We will publish a paper Monday, I think, with Anthropic on the open standards that we think are super critical to driving an open ecosystem on driving agent building, agent tool calling, and what the whole agentic development lifecycle looks like. All of that starts with, if you think about, we're in a new world where applications are going to be built in a different way, you need new standards to be able to do that. MCP is a great example for a set of standards that we're using for tool calling, and I think we're going to see that one stay for a while. And when you look at that, I think there are a number of areas where we're going to see now a set of standards start establishing so that we can really drive the innovation that we need to at the speed, yet all start to standardize on what these new application implementations look like. So for us, this starts from multiple different levels, from what it means to have common AI gateways so you can access any kind of underlying LLM, what it means to have simple tool calling using MCP, or even agent-to-agent protocols, whether it be A2A or MCP. Those standards, I think, are not only evolving, I don't think it's hard to say even with MCP, even though it's not even been in a year for MCP when you think about it, that we have established a standard, but I think we're a lot closer. And so driving these open source and open standards become a really, really, really pivotal point to how we will see this innovation flywheel happening in the market. Now, with that, like when you put this all together, this kind of like really unlocks, we believe, the power and the potential for where we see the market going. When you look at this and bring it all together, when you think about the new interaction paradigms that are really going to be unlocked by the fact that you now have multi-agent orchestration that is really enabled by a way where you can truly drive agentic AI orchestration that uses multiple different types of agentic styles and different types of agentic systems and LLMs that are underneath it. But underneath that is a set of capable agents that come from multiple different software providers, custom agents that you have built on your own. And this way of really thinking about underneath the covers, having components of task automation from deterministic to fully agentic. One of the things that we saw in the 2,500 engagements that we were working on was that most clients didn't necessarily need everything to be agentic. And just because we're screaming the world is agentic, as you implement things, there is this spectrum from things that you will always need deterministic and never make sense to be agentic, to those that maybe you're using an agentic plan, but maybe you can leave like the execution to just a simple tool call, to you're going to let that reasoning loop and the execution of the tools always be fully agentic. And we're seeing this in a lot of our engagements, that the trade-off ends up becoming, okay, is it more important for me to have latency? Is it more important for me to have consistency because of the kind of things that I'm executing on? And this notion of agentic having this spectrum on automation from deterministic to fully automated is important. The knowledge piece we talked about in terms of unlocking these vast amounts of unstructured data that exist, but really also driving that into the existing business processes that organizations have. What we see actually is a spectrum where clients are taking their traditional conversational agents, or they're taking their traditional processes that may be RPA processes or BPM processes, and they start to agentify components of that. But as a lot of the vendors that you even see down below start to build out their own agents, the power becomes in orchestrating across all of them with that simple interaction paradigm and with access to your data. And this is what we're really, really spending a lot of our time and that we're looking forward to seeing how this evolves, because there's probably never been a time in my career that I have been more excited to be in this space, because I think we're going to see quite a bit of transformation in the next 24 months to drive visions like this into reality in everything that we're working on. With that, I think I'll take questions, or I think we have a little more time. We have a few minutes if there are any questions. Go ahead.
Orchestration. So, because I understand orchestration maybe is your proprietary thing. It's not, maybe we're giving it to like...
It's open. Some of it's open. So through what we've done with Langflow, there's a lot of work that we've done on the orchestrate side where it is open source, and we're driving some of that in open source. On even the unstructured side, there's something that we'll be announcing in the next 30 days on unstructured data that is also going to be in open source. And so there is a lot that we not only have done on the orchestration layer, but also in the underlying knowledge and knowledge retrieval space. You'll see something in the next 30 days on that as well.
Thank you.
I was kind of curious, one of the things you said about enterprise deployment in Gen AI, and I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with the MIT study that came out basically damning Gen AI. You know, there's 5% or less in terms of success. You mentioned it's a data problem, but I don't necessarily know, and I'm not the arbiter of this, but I don't necessarily know if that's the actual situation. From everything that I've been doing and folks that I know, the problem is guardrailing, and you end up boxing the LLM in. The other piece of it is, like, data is not so much a problem because you can structure it pretty easy. You tend to see the least innovation at the biggest companies, but there's a lot of smaller companies that are very, very good at structuring this data. So I was just kind of curious, like, how you came to that conclusion. The other thing is, what I've seen working with large enterprises like DoorDash and Coinbase, it's not so much a data problem, it's like they don't even have the data or know where it is.
Yeah. We spent, actually, we opened up our discussion this morning on the agentic ADLC, just like you have software development lifecycle, you're gonna have an agent development lifecycle on this topic. The number one problem in all of our engagements is, what do you start with to really teach the business problem? So as an example, the ones that we talked about today, we have a number of assistant implementations. Like, it's been a core part of our technology where we've probably done the assistant implementations for probably some of the largest enterprises that are out there. When you look at that, you actually have a standard operating procedure that teaches you about how you want to respond to certain situations in which a client asks for, tell me what my health benefits are, who can I go talk to, what is my deduction? All of those things in terms of training with your ground truth actually exists in a system. The problem is, we don't have ways to be able to take all of your data and to be able to translate that into something that teaches me about your business processes in the right way. It's something that actually we're working on. But that's an example of something where, if you look at some of the common use cases, I didn't talk about the use cases we see. 3 common use cases we see. One in customer care. It probably is because of our strong assistant background. In that particular use case, you can actually use your ground truth from the fact that you have something that's Q&A as a starting point, and how you do more agentic things on top of that to, like, do recommendations, to actually kind of do treatment. So that's one example. The second, and I think the 5%, I think, is low, but I understand why. It's because people don't start with the use case or the outcome in mind. For us, like, we have been very public about our client zero stories, where we've actually, I'm gonna say, drank our own champagne versus eat our own dog food, but we have used the technology internally across our different back-end systems and our support systems, and we've been fairly public about taking out $3.5 billion in G&A, not just through agentic, but it really requires framing the problem, doing, in some cases, simple automation, to then using, like, initially we were using just deterministic methods, to then using LLMs, to now using Gen AI and agentic. So that transition, we have a number of stories that are not only IBM, but a lot of our clients that are using these on real AI productivity type of use cases where we're seeing the outcomes to the bottom line and helping our clients drive that. And the third area that we actually see quite a bit is in the IT space. I'm sure all of you in your companies are using some sort of Gen AI tool for code, for the software development lifecycle. That's the other space that we see it quite a bit. So like even when we broke down the categories of the 2,500, those were the three. And if you didn't start with that outcome, you didn't see the kind of results. Our data shows probably a little more than the 5%, probably more like 15 to 20% actually showing value from these. But it really starts with, you got to start with that outcome in mind. I think last question, I'm out of time.
By the way, amazing speech, especially on the side of the trust and reliability. And I do think that data is the big issue, especially the ground truth data, because you have to collect it either from customers. It's also very, very highly specific. It's a very, very dependent on vertical. If you're doing it in healthcare, so you have to go to your customers. They're like putting the queries, putting the inputs, and there are also like edge cases. You have to collect those. In the finance, it's like its own, and like they're like sub verticals. So regarding those and regarding the evals as well, because evals are also the big thing. How do you handle those?
You want to have a discussion later? Like I think you need eval harnesses to be able to drive things, and you need a way to be able to convert your ground truth into like a reasonable format, and to even in some cases synthetically generate. Like part of like I'll tell you, one of the things we kind of talked about today is as an entire organization, we're going to do evals in one suite with one harness with a way that you can have extensible metrics for whatever your use cases are. Because in some cases you're doing an eval and accuracy is the thing that matters. In other cases you're doing an eval and what matters to you is completion rate. Yeah. In another case, like it could be that consistency matters. So the use case really changes, and so having a common eval framework and harness becomes really important, but it needs to be extensible for the variability that exists within eval.
I'll be honest, especially for last year or two, like traditional ways of we're doing evals, I think they were built by people who are building MLOps tools or
that's very
like
different.
Yeah, they're very different, right? So or LMOps tool. And if we're getting to agent ops, what I noticed is they're completely. It's a not correct approach for an agent ops. They don't really know exactly how it works because the agents have like significantly more possibilities of taking over. And as you said, correctness is far from the only variable. There's robustness, consistency, verbosity, and a lot of stuff. What do you think about, first of all, you already mentioned the synthetic golden data set, which we're already doing. What do you think about the simulation environments for agents?
I think that's also RL gyms and stuff like that are going to be really popular. I'll talk to you after for sure, like if you want to chat.
Yes.
I just want to recognize that I'm out of time, and I know you have another Ritika that is going to speak, which my namesake is very hard to come by, and I'm grateful that the person speaking after me is also named Ritika, and I want to make sure she has her full time, but I would love to spend time with you. Guys, thank you. It was a pleasure to spend time with you.